everyone, and welcome to We Watch Bad Films, the podcast where we watch bad films so you don't have to. My name's Gary, and with me is Jay.
Hello.
Hello, Jay. Nice to speak to you again. We're going to dive straight into it because it's a series for which we have some knowledge, some certainty about what we're talking about. Quite often you will launch some piece of crap on me, but today we decided that we would go through the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and today we are at episode 8 even, that's good, episode 8, The Last Jedi. Directed by Rian Johnson, released in 2017, a year that makes me feel incredibly ancient, knowing that was 8 years ago as we record this. Yeah, and it feels like it was released about 2 years ago. Yeah. Anything you want to say about The Last Jedi before we get into it?
Yeah, I agree. That's a long time ago. I'm blaming COVID for that. My lack of understanding of the last 8 years. Certainly 3 of those years have gone out the window. I think there was a lot of anticipation for The Last Jedi, right?
I agree, and that was my next question to you, actually. What was your state of mind as Last Jedi was being released?
Intrepid. I was waiting with trepidation. Maybe that's the word I mean. Because I think we've chatted vaguely about this. The sequel trilogy it sort of came out of nowhere quite quickly. George Lucas all of a sudden one day was like, right, I'm selling Lucasfilm, and Disney bought it, and Disney were like, right, immediately we're going to make some sequels. So the Force Awakens sort of caught people on the back foot, I think, a little bit, and the hype around it was pretty big. However, we'd gone through the prequel situation where the hype was massive, and the films were, let's say, a little disappointing initially, certainly when they came out. I think their reputation is a bit better these days, but anyway. The Force Awakens, it was a great opening, but not much really happened in the way of story, and because of that, taken in of itself, the film is a little bit unfinished. So we were really waiting for episode 8 to really flesh out the narrative, and I really think episode 8 had to be really good, and that's how I was feeling, Gary. How about you?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Force Awakens was like, okay, this is interesting, and we feel safe, and we're all happy. I don't think we're not moving very far, but we've got some characters, so let's see where this goes. We then install Rian Johnson, and you're like, oh, he's done some interesting things. I wonder what he's going to do with it. He's not the first choice, I would have said, of most, when you're looking for potentially the biggest blockbuster of the year. So, yeah, it was like, as you say, trepidation, but we've set everything up in a certain way, so where can we go with it? And if you recall our review, I think that's basically what we said. This is all right. This is good. It's not setting the world on fire, but certainly it's reset the universe to a place where we can do something interesting. So I think at that point, should you need to reset your minds, let's play back in the trailer for whichever episode number I just said, 8, The Last Jedi, and we'll come back and talk about it.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now.
Let the past die. Kill it. way to become what you were meant to be. We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down. Come on!
This is not going to go the way you think. Fulfill your destiny.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Okay, so that was the trailer for The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi, which is not the last film. That's helpful, isn't it? At this point, we already had Episode 9 in the schedule, and clearly it's only 2 years away, rather than the 3 years of Lucas trilogies, so you've got to have something in place, ready to go. A very, very brief plot summary, because there's a lot going on in this film. As opposed to our usual rubbish, usually there's a very flimsy plot line that I can barely understand. In this one, there's quite a lot of plot lines going on. So we open with a kind of a battle scene out in space. Poe Dameron tricks Hux. They release a load of bombs onto a ship. Some characters are okay. Some characters are not okay. Finn wakes up from his coma from the last film. Hux is reprimanded by Snoke. Through shenanigans, Rey and no, let's not go into Rey. Let's go back to this is what I'm saying. There's a lot going on. They end up on the slowest chase scene of all time, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, where Admiral Holdo, Captain Holdo, can't remember the
Vice
rank.
Admiral.
Vice Admiral Holdo is flying the ship at very slow speed, trying to outpace the First Order troops. Meanwhile, Finn and Rose have gone off to a place where they think they can find a code breaker to help break codes. Which there's a whole cantina scene, casino, that's the word, casino scene. They sort all that out, come back with the code breaker. He turns out to be a double agent. Bad news. On the other plot line, Rey goes off to learn Jediing from Luke Skywalker, who tells his woeful backstory of how he did not trust his nephew, Kylo Ren, and eventually Luke dies. Rey doesn't lead the charge back. The film ends. No. There are actually too many things to talk about to do a proper synopsis, because I would say there is at least 4 plot strands running at the same time.
Yeah.
And we end where we end. So I'm going to abandon that terrible synopsis and just let's chuckle along to the conversation. So given that woeful synopsis I just gave you, where do you want to start, Jay?
Well, firstly, before I start, I would like to say also in your defence, as when I was re-watching it for this podcast, I realised we'd got 2 hours in, and I thought, well, surely we're going to be wrapping up by now. Oh no, there's about another 30-40 minutes. It's a long film. So, yeah, the synopsis, it's actually quite hard to synopsis this film, because there's a lot going on, but it goes on for ages.
I also think there is a point, and it's just after the Rey and Kylo saber fight, where it feels like the film should end about there.
Yeah. But
then there's a bit more, and I think if we don't, I'm prejudging before we've even talked about it. How about we wind all the way back and we say overall, and I think this is going to be interesting, Jay, because we haven't talked about this film probably since release, and I got the hint talking to you, saying we're going to do this episode, that we're going to have slightly different opinions on this, which gave me all spicy feelings. So that's interesting. So overall, What's your opinion? Before I say this, actually, another caveat. I think we should try not to judge it based on the Rise of Skywalker, because we should sort of like that film is coming. Okay, we're going to sort that out later, but let's not judge this film based on what happens in Rise of Skywalker. You've got to assume by the end there's still going to be another film and other stuff's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
you see where I'm going with that.
I do. So, yeah. So we're reviewing.
What's your
We're reviewing two things. We're reviewing the film taken in of itself, but also how it fits in with the sequel trilogy.
To date, yes, and as point of release. So overall, based on that, what's your opinion on the Rise of Skywalker? What's your opinion on The Last Jedi? Professional podcasting, people.
Yeah, we know what we're doing, guys. You're in safe hands here, which is exactly what they said when Rian Johnson took over to direct and write. What I think overall is, I was and still am, after rewatching it, fundamentally disappointed by The Last Jedi. I think it has some good parts to it. I think it's basically quite a well-made film, which is not what we usually watch. I think the cinematography in some scenes are stellar, quite literally. But I think it is muddled. And I was watching it, and I was last night, and I was thinking, because I think when it first came out, I thought it was trash. Watching it last night, I felt like if I could warp my brain and watch it just as a film unto itself, nothing to do with the Star Wars universe, I think I would enjoy it a bit more, even though it is a bit long and it is still a bit flawed. Like you gave a synopsis there, but actually, if you really look at the details of what is going on with these characters in this film, quite a lot of it is like, what? Doesn't make sense. Or some characters go off and do some stuff, and it has actually no bearing whatsoever to the narrative. For example, the trying to find the codebreaker. They find a codebreaker, and they don't need him at the end, and they get captured, and they don't achieve the thing that they're trying to do. I think, generally speaking, I'm still disappointed with it, even though it's an okay science fiction fantasy film. It's just not good enough. That's what I think.
Words, and well argued. I would say, and I thought this might be the case, I quite like The Last Jedi.
Oh God!
That's not to say you're wrong about there are threads that just go nowhere, and I think the casino scene and everything around it is the biggest culprit of a lack of progress. Of the whole characters go off to do something, nothing happens, and what they actually tried to do resulted in nothing. It's a bit like when we talk about Indiana Jones, about how if Indiana Jones hadn't turned up in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Nazis would still have found the Ark. But anyway, so getting off topic slightly. But so I quite like it. Like you say, there is really good cinematography. Certain scenes are really interesting, and I think almost everyone from a cinematographical point likes the throne room fight, just because it's really interesting, that bright red background, lots of dark shapes. But then simultaneously, a lot of people like to rip on that scene because you look at the guys in the background, they're just doing nothing. They're just sort of dancing. All the guards in the room waiting for their turn to be slaughtered. But overall, I quite like The Last Jedi, and I thought by the end, there are interesting things happening here. So you said, for example, things don't get resolved. But what I do think is we get a lot of questions answered. And as I said, we're not going to talk about the Rise of Skywalker here. We do get a lot of questions answered about, Rey's parents are nothing. They're no one. They're nobody. Which is, I think, a really interesting direction for the franchise to say. Actually, in a franchise that's obsessed with everyone being related to each other, she's just here. She's just come out of nowhere. And that is further reinforced by the sort of epilogue bit with the small child at the end grabbing the broom via the Force, suggesting there are lots of Jedi out there ready to be trained.
Yeah, I don't disagree with those points. I don't disagree with them. My overall, so I have two feelings about the Rise of The Last Jedi, episode 8. Like I just broached earlier. When I first watched it, I just thought it was complete trash. Rewatching it, I do think it's a well-made film with some interesting stuff in it, but I still think it is deeply flawed, and I don't like it as much as you seem to. Let me just explain to you what I felt like when I first watched it at the cinema. I think halfway through, I was like, almost, maybe even literally, certainly metaphorically, looking around me to see what other people's reactions were, because I was incandescent with rage. Because don't make me... Oh, God, you're going to get me going here, Gary. I can feel it. I can feel the hate swelling in me now. Don't make me get invested in Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and drop all these questions as to what's going to happen in the next film. And then, I tell you a great example of this, and then just chuck them away. Don't end Episode 7 with Rey finding Luke Skywalker and handing him his lightsaber, which we've seen travelling through, at this point, 8 episodes, more or less. And then the first scene of Episode 8, when he takes the lightsaber, he just chucks it behind him. That is not good for me. I don't want to see that. I want you to set up plot points and then bloody move them on. Don't do a big about turn. And that is what I felt when I first watched it. It was like, right, so you're basically going to poo all over all of the questions in Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and then just go off-piste. No, I don't want that. It just felt like Rian Johnson and the writers of Episode 7, The Force Awakens had not exchanged notes whatsoever. And it was just that feeling of like, I have got no idea where this is going, and not in a good way. What do you think about that?
I think you're entitled to your opinion. So, when J.J. Abrams was announced as master and commander of the new Star Wars films, my immediate thought was, ugh, because I like J.J.'s ideas. So this sounds, I like J.J.'s ideas, but I prefer it when other people execute them. This sounds a lot like another director who did some other Star Wars films. In that I'm not going to talk about the mystery box thing because that's just overplayed. People talk about that too much, the mystery box idea in JJ's writing and filmmaking. But more is that he does flashy, flashy, bang, bang, and then you go, oh, that was good. And then 20 minutes later, you think, actually, what happened there? Oh, that made any sense, did it? It makes sense in the moment when you're caught up in it all, because he doesn't like hanging around in his works. He likes moving. He has very dynamic shots that people don't stand still. And Rian likes a bit of action, but he also likes to stop and characters to have interactions as well. So I was worried when JJ took over, and he did exactly what I thought he would, which is to make loads of flashy stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it. Now, when it comes to what Rian chose to do with this, I'm hoping I can find the clip and I'll drop it in here. I can distinctly recall Rian Johnson being interviewed by Simon Mayo for his movie podcast, far inferior to this one, where he said, I was given no points to start from. I was given no notes. I was allowed to use an entirely blank canvas.
And somewhere, is there a big storyboard or a spreadsheet that says, this is the beginning of the story, this is where we think it might go, this is where you're fitting in, can you make A link to B, and so on? Was it like that?
Not at all. No, that's not how it worked. It was the script for The Force Awakens, which I read and loved, and I loved the characters it created and the path it set them on. And then it was a conversation about, okay, what do you think happens next?
So Rian was allowed to do whatever he wants. Now, if that's what he chooses to do, that's one thing. But I am astonished that Star Wars, and people like to blame Kathleen Kennedy, but Disney is such a monstrous organisation. I don't think we can put it on one person. I'm astonished that there was no real oversight to say, actually, this does connect or this doesn't connect. I'm okay with him doing his own thing, but I knew by the end of it, and I said to myself, it depends what happens in the third film, which we're not going to talk about today.
I totally agree. But what they should have done is given Rian Johnson a parallel film to do, like Rogue One or Solo or one of those films, or a TV show or something, where, yeah, you've got the world to exist in, but you can go off on your own storyline. He's doing an episode which literally starts at the end point of the previous episode, and we're doing the Skywalker saga here, man. You can't mess around with it. And this is not fully Rian Johnson's fault, and it's someone's fault. I don't know who it is. We could say Kathleen Kennedy, we could say the giant empire that is Disney, but someone massively dropped the ball here. The things that made Star Wars good, and in fact any narrative franchise, even TV shows, Game of Thrones, things like that, it's the basic narrative. It's all the characters and what they get up to, yes, but it is the narrative. You get to one point, you get to the next point, and you feel like you're on a journey. Whereas when episode 8 arrived, I was like, what the hell is going on here? And also, this is Rian Johnson's fault. He got the character of Luke Skywalker completely wrong. And
so we're going to start this, are we? We're going to start this. The whole
yes. And do you know who agrees with me? Luke Skywalker.
Mark Hamill, I know he does. I know he tweeted about it at the time, didn't he?
Yeah,
but he still did it.
And props to Mark Hamill, because he said all that, and he said it quite publicly as well. And he's been on record.
He tweeted it. I'm sure he did.
Yeah. But his performance in The Last Jedi is really good, and I think he's one of the best things about it. What do you think about the characterization of Luke Skywalker?
I think we last saw Luke, I think it's 20 years previous, at the end of Return of the Jedi. And I believe, I'm going to be corrected by nerds, I'm sure, that nobody was allowed to do material in between these two trilogies. They probably are now because they're finished, but at the time you weren't allowed to touch on stuff post-Disney buyout, post-Jedi, that touched on Luke Skywalker. So we don't know what he's been doing. All we know is what the film tells us, that he set up a Jedi training school, went all right for a bit, and then he saw flashes of darkness in Kylo Ren and attempted to take him out, changed his mind when he realised what he was doing. We get a kind of Rashomon, see it from two different points of view thing. And then because of his failure, he goes into hiding and has to live with that for, as far as we know, the rest of his existence. So we don't have the guy in the black jumpsuit who was nearly killed by the Emperor. We've got a different guy 20 years on who watched his sister and his presumably best friend get married, have children, and fail in their relationship, and has gone off in hiding. So I think to get the character wrong, I think assumes that the character stays static. What's your counter for that?
My counter is, I don't care about all that. It's terrible. Well, you're just pooing all. Star Wars is not a gritty drama. It's a fantasy, and Luke Skywalker, for all of the grey areas of some of these characters, he is a hero, and he is the hero of the Star Wars, certainly the original trilogy. And you get this golden ticket to get the original characters and the original actors from the original Star Wars trilogy, and you turn Luke Skywalker into a miserable, depressed hermit. That's no good for me. I was annoyed in episode 7 that there was no reunion of the original characters and cast in episode 7. Then they killed Han off. So, okay, we're not going to have a school reunion with Han, but let's get Lando, R2, C-3PO, Chewbacca, Leia and Luke together. Come on, we're all waiting for it, and it doesn't bloody happen. And they are side characters in this, and Rian Johnson thinks that Rey and Finn and Poe Dameron gets much more screen time in this, and like Holdo and whatever the Vice Admiral's name is, thinks that they're the important characters. No, they're not. Nobody cares about those. We care about the original characters, Luke Skywalker, Leia, all of those people I mentioned, and they get 30 seconds in a sort of Force dream at the end, and all of those original characters are sidelined. And I was also watching last night, and I was thinking, Leia has just watched her or felt her brother die, and she's chatting to this Rey girl she's just met, and she's like, "Yeah, I know, I felt him die. Anyway, shall we create the new empire and the new resistance?" It's like, your brother's just died. And he was killed ostensibly by your son, and your ex-husband is also dead. Can we not have some sort of denouement for this? No, rubbish. Carry on, Gary.
I don't know whose fault it is, but it is baffling that we don't get a single scene of Luke, Leia, and Han together. I know what you're saying about the other characters, but Luke, Leia, and Han,
we will never.
The OG never came together in that area. Again, they plotted for Han to die. Okay, this is a universe in which things can happen and things can change. So we could have done that. We could have done something about it, but to never see those three on screen again. And I don't agree that they have to be the main characters of this new trilogy. You are, after all, talking about people in their 70s, but they should have been a bit more forward. I agree. Though when Han dies at the end, and then for some reason they keep Carrie Fisher around in this film for a bit, and then turn her into Mary Poppins, I don't really understand that decision either. I don't know why they even bothered. They should have just given everything that happened, and Carrie Fisher as well. They should have. Well, actually, what was the timing of that? Did she die December 2016?
Just before.
Do you want to get the door?
Sorry.
All right.
Will you be able to edit this out? It's so annoying.
No, it's going live, mate. It's going. The mic is hot.
Yeah, I agree. They didn't. Okay, not all of those characters had to be the lead characters, but really Luke and Leia could have been much more forward. And I really don't understand. Leia appears in the first third of the film, and then she's not in it for the middle. She's in bed for the middle, and then she appears at the end. I don't understand. You've got Princess Leia and Carrie Fisher. Make her do some work.
That sort of reeks of contractually must be in it, but I don't really have anything for her to do. So let's have her appear and then turn her into like a popsicle.
Yeah, so when I was first watching this is all I could think about. Like, I couldn't even really pay attention to the storyline or the new characters. I didn't care. And when we went to Canto Bight, the Monaco of Star Wars, I was like, I completely tuned out when I remember watching it in the cinema, thinking, what on earth is going on? We're going on this journey to find a codebreaker with Finn and Rose. I don't want to do this. I want to see what is happening. Where's Lando? What's Chewbacca doing? Where is Leia? Leia's in bed, layering down. Just give me the original. Give me something. I think the narrative and character decisions in The Last Jedi are not good. I think it's well made and well shot. We haven't actually said things that we like, but I will give it that. And I did say in of itself, it's an okay space fantasy film. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it's a Star Wars film with the original characters in it, and it just drove me insane that we didn't have enough of the original characters, and also the new characters don't have anything to do. Poe Dameron is just wandering around looking befuddled, being angry at his own Republic resistance friends for about 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you're right in that most of the characters, even the new ones, don't get a lot to do. So we introduce even more new characters and give them something to do instead. But obviously you are not alone in thinking that. I recall distinctly texts from two separate people I know who were Star Wars fans who went to see it, and somebody called it "Carry On Star Wars," and someone else just couldn't hate it more. And the humour is certainly very divisive in these films.
Oh God, yeah, it's when the opening section where Poe Dameron is talking to General Hux over the intercom, and he pretends that he can't hear him, and General Hux is going, "Can you hear me?" Tonally, it was wrong. I felt it at the time, and I've read reviews at the time since then who've also agreed with me. Tonally, it came out of nowhere. It didn't feel correct. And also, what you've now done is you turned General Hux, who had the ability to be quite a menacing character, into a joke. And General Hux, as a character, never survives that. And I can't forgive Rian Johnson for that either. What do you think about the humour?
I think the humour is more in keeping with the rest of the films than is perceived. E.g., are we so far away from negative, had a reactor leak, everything fine now, how are you? How are we that far away from that sort of humour when you're doing the I can't hear you joke? But I will agree that Hux as a character never recovers from that. And that's not the fault of that joke, because then you just give the character something else to do that makes them more badass again. But he is constantly then downtrodden. And can we talk about that opening scene? Because, my God, what a who's who of great British actors in that opening joke.
I was actually watching it, and I kept getting distracted by oh my God, it's them! Oh my God, it's them! And some of them don't even have anything to say. They just walk past. Yeah, they really are. That is everyone must have been working on that film.
Yeah.
That period. No character actors are available for this period because they're all in The Last Jedi.
And everyone's agent was on the phone saying, "Look, we've got a chance, very few chances left to be in a Star Wars film. So can we make this happen, please?" And by the way, the last one made all sorts of billions of dollars. So there's a good chance this one will do all right too. I mean, I'm going to pick out one that blew my mind in the cinema, and I've forgotten, and I watched it again for this pod, and I was like, it's Adrian Edmondson. It's so funny seeing Adrian Edmondson in a Star Wars film. And some of our viewers may not know, either because they're tiny or because they're not British, because I suspect his fame hasn't really travelled over the pond. But Adrian Edmondson, one of the most memorable alternative comedians to come out of the scene from the comic strip in the early 80s in the UK, and has really never gone away. He's done lots of jobs in between, but most known for his partnership with Rick Mayall, of course.
Also married to Jennifer Saunders from Absolutely Fabulous.
Married to Jennifer Saunders, yes, that's right.
I'm surprised she didn't turn up as a... Can you imagine her as a Vice Admiral? Or maybe...
Yeah. Perhaps she should have played Holdo, which is, of course, picked up by Laura Dern. Is that
or
right?
Captain Phasma, maybe.
Hello there, darlings. Yes. That was a bit Julian Clary, wasn't it? Captain Phasma, another character, sadly picked up, apparently no threads, so we're just going to toss her into a pit without really resolving her problems with Finn, to be honest.
No, because I think in episode 7 they're setting up something between those two, some sort of backstory, clearly. Some sort of vibe, and then she just turns up out of nowhere, right at the end, the last half hour, has all of the odds stacked in her favour. She's in her own ship, surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands, of her troops. And then there's just Rose and Finn with no weapons, with their hands tied, and she still manages to die. Literally, she's terrible. That was annoying. But just to talk about the opening again, I just remember watching it, and even last night, even though I was trying to frame it in a more positive light when I watched it again recently, but that opening scene where, you get the joke with Poe Dameron and Hux, that's when Aid Edmondson appears as well, and it's like they're doing this terrible joke with Poe Dameron and General Hux, and then there's Adrian Edmondson. And then also the world's most disastrous and pathetic bombing run.
Oh, actually, just think about it. Wouldn't it have been better for Adrian Edmondson to be on the receiving end of that joke?
Yes!
we have you now. Ha 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 ha. And then Poe Dameron does the whole "can't hear you" trick, or your mother, or whatever it is. I can't remember the details, but yeah. Then you then save Hux from that embarrassment. You don't have to then repair his character later. You can just do it to some peon.
Yeah. And then we can have Jennifer Saunders as the Vice Admiral. You're
going to say Jennifer Aniston, weren't you?
Jennifer Aniston, she could play Phasma. We're rewriting it as we speak, and I think it's sounding pretty good already. I just think that opening section where the world's slowest space bombers move really slowly towards the First Order fleet, and literally they all get destroyed apart from one. And then that one also then gets destroyed, and then so I'm watching that thinking, what the hell is going on here? What the hell is Rian Johnson making the Resistance do? And also, what is a bomber in space? I don't understand. And then Poe Dameron gets back to Leia, and Leia's like, what the hell were you doing? And Poe Dameron's like, what are you talking about? And Leia is annoyed with Poe Dameron. And I don't blame her, because that was a complete disaster of a bombing run. That is just the first 10 minutes, and I was already miffed.
It feels like we could just spend a while slagging it off, not slagging it off, defending it, and whatever, and going back and forth. But I feel like we've kind of made our points. But we often like to say, are there any words of wisdom? Are there any quotes that you want to pick out from the film?
I quite enjoyed Yoda appearing. He looks a bit weird, but he sort of appears at a point in the film where it's like it's sort of slumping a bit, and he appears, and Luke Skywalker's about to burn down this tree with some books in, and he says, he's talking to Yoda, who appears as a Force ghost, and he says, "You're about to burn down those books," and Luke says,
Spot on impression.
Luke says, "The sacred Jedi texts," as if he's like admonishing Yoda for not knowing what he was burning down. And Yoda says, "Page turners they were not. Read them, have you?" That's quite good. Rian
that is good, actually.
He must have enjoyed writing that for himself, I think, Rian Johnson.
And it seems that humour is in character for Yoda, I think. Slightly mischievous.
Yeah. And I think they were trying to do that a little bit with Luke Skywalker when Rey first appears. But what happened was they made him drink blue milk from a teat of a fat alien instead, and I think it was a bit off. But the Yoda stuff is pretty good.
Yoda also says, and there are two quotes in The Last Jedi that I often mutter to myself, and this is one of them: "We are what they grow beyond."
We are what they grow beyond.
Yes, and I quite like it. I think it's succinct. I think it's something Yoda would say. And I think it's overlooked as a little motto.
Yeah.
I think it's very cute. I also like Kylo Ren, and I think this is emblematic of the entire film. He says, "Let the past die. Kill it if you have to." And that is exactly what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine for Kylo Ren to say. It's not fine to be something that the filmmakers should be doing with the Star Wars IP. Is my point here, and it feels a little bit pompous for Rian Johnson to write that about himself, because that's what he's trying to do. So I'm just going to say that I like Rian Johnson. I like all of his films, but there's a lot of hubris in his writing of this particular Star Wars film. I wanted were there any quotes from Leia or Luke that you wanted to mention? I like basically all the scenes with Snoke. He's got a few decent lines.
Well, you've got Andy Serkis having a great time.
Yes.
So yeah, that's going to be good by itself. What does he say? Something like, "Take that ridiculous thing off." Kylo's mask.
Yeah, take that ridiculous mask off. Yeah, all of that stuff as well. I just think It's what? So you only have just got to this point where you're going to tell Kylo Ren that his mask is ridiculous. Well, you're
Yeah.
wearing a. By the way, you're wearing a golden robe. Where does the ridiculousness end? I do have to just shoehorn this bit in while we're talking about quotes. The Snoke situation for me is also when I was watching it in the cinema first time, and all of a sudden Snoke just dies. I just like, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You cannot set up Snoke as the main uber villain and then just kill him off halfway through the second film. He just turns into a plot machination. That's all he is. There's nothing to. He's not a character. It's just underuse of Andy Serkis, which I was watching The Batman recently. He turns up as Alfred in The Batman. He's in it for about 2 scenes. Ugh, underuse of Andy Serkis should be a cinematic crime.
Andy Serkis, of course, being one of the few actors who've done multiple appearances in Star Wars as different characters, with his outstanding turn as in the prison for prison planet Arcana 5 in the series Andor, in which he is just amazing.
Yes.
But we're not reviewing that. We're not reviewing that here, because that's a good thing. This podcast is We Watch Bad Films, and I would say Last Jedi is not a bad film. You would say... What would you say? What would you say?
Well, unfortunately for The Last Jedi, it is a Star Wars film. If it had not been a Star Wars film, I think in of itself it is a decent sci-fi fantasy film. But because of the context and Rian Johnson loving the idea that he can just rip up the script from the previous film and shuffle around all of the Star Wars tropes, I would say, and also because some of the plot points in this film are just nonsensical, and the characterizations, I would say that this is just edging into being a bad film.
So what I really like, Jay, is that nothing has been more divisive in the Star Wars universe than the film The Last Jedi, and people fall into two camps. I watched the Star Wars online community just fragment into pieces over this film. People like myself who thought it said interesting things, did interesting ideas, and was going to take us somewhere new, and people like yourself that thought it just basically crapped on what had gone before. And both are both correct and incorrect. But I'm pleased that our podcast mirrors the general Star Wars universe
it does.
thinking.
And just as a little addendum here, I was doing a bit of research about the reviews of the film, some reviews now, but mainly reviews at the time. And it is weird, you're right. I think even now, if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, like the critic score is really high and the audience score is really low. And at the time, I was reading through it last night, just thinking, all of these big media outlets are absolutely loving it. And even if you just go on IMDb, or a lot of the reviews that pop up are really, really positive. Like, this is one of the best films of all time. And I got to reading, I was on Reddit reading a few bits, and I was reading an article where a guy goes in quite hard on it and does a little bit of deep diving. And he came to the conclusion that there were, now this is very allegedly, there might have been, apart from the fact that, maybe a lot of people did love this film, as well as also hate it, he was suggesting that possibly there were a lot of paid reviews at the time to get it some buzz and to make it a film that was held in good stead, had a good reputation. And I was thinking, wow, that would make sense to me, because some of these reviews I was reading from some of these big outlets were just absolutely blisteringly positive. And I wonder if there's a bit of intrigue there. We're not going to deep dive into it today, but I'm just putting it out there for listeners. I'm just putting it out
There's
there.
nothing we can answer there, but what I would say is if critics like it, that supports your theory that it's a decent film, just not a good Star Wars film, because critics are less likely to be hardcore Star Wars fans.
Exactly.
People leaving reviews online are probably going to be hardcore Star Wars fans, would be my guess.
But I would say it is a Star Wars film, and it's a bad Star Wars film, so therefore it's a bad film. How about that?
Well, it fits the brief of this podcast then. If that is the case, I cannot wait to see what we think of The Rise of Skywalker, which apparently is in episode 9 and follows this film, The Last Jedi. So that'll be interesting, won't it? Won't you join us? That'll be nice. Anyway, not quite sure what happened there. So, Jay, thank you for joining us and talking about The Last Jedi. Is there anything else you wanted to say, by the way, before I finish?
I don't know. I just wish they'd given Rian Johnson a different film to do in the Star Wars universe. The fact that we didn't get the original characters, I am bereft, Gary, because they're all snuffing it. I'm bereft. Anyway, thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thanks very much for watching. If you want to join in with the conversation, you can find us on Instagram at We Watch Bad Films. You can send us emails if you're very old-fashioned at wewatchbadfilms@gmail.com. And you can also find ways to donate at ko-fi.com/WWFpod. Yes, so please get involved as we carry on talking about bad films. It'd be great to hear from you. Please suggest things and drop us a line. So thank you very much, Jay.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, you. Goodbye.
Bye.